roll call, please.
Mr. Hess,
Present.
Mr. Byrne, Mr. Lear, Mr. Legess, Mr. Olthoff, Mr. Snipes, Ms. Dunbar, Mr. Ritter, Ms. Parker, Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Carrico, Mr. Eckhoff, Mr. Smith, Ms. Zucolo, Mr. Wheeler. We have a quorum.
I have not received anything for public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Any public comment? Moving on for the approval of minutes from the June 12th, 2019. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Olthoff, second by Mr. Legess. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Up next we have Tammy Peterson from the ETSB board. Good morning.
So, I'm Tammy Peterson, the 911 coordinator. I've been with the board for almost as long as it's been in existence, so I'm here to talk a little bit about what the ETSB is and what CANCOM is. Our board is made up of 9 members. Those appointments are made by the entities that are highlighted here. And that makeup is defined in a county board resolution that was created when the initial referendum to establish the 911 system was passed. Jim Lamont serves as our chairman, and Chief Johnston from Bradley serves as our vice chairman. The responsibilities of the board are defined by statute, and those include things like planning the 911 system, coordinating the implementation, upgrades, and maintenance of the system, receiving the surcharge dollars, and authorizing the expenditures of those funds that are on deposit with the Treasurer's Office. In 1988, the initial referendum passed. In 1992, we went live with our 911 system. In 1994, we started receiving cellular calls, but it wasn't until 2004 that we actually started getting location of those callers. But that came in the way of latitude and longitude information, so we had to work with the county's GIS system to be able to convert that information to a street address so that we could dispatch those calls. One of the biggest projects we took on was the countywide radio system in 2002. Prior to that, the agencies working together couldn't use a radio to communicate with each other. And those difficulties were highlighted during the Amtrak incident in 1999. The responders were literally running back and forth with information for each other. And that was the same year that CANCOM was formed. In 2007, our fire paging system was updated. We went from a single transmitter to a simulcast system with 5 transmitters throughout the county. And that was primarily funded through some grant dollars that Sheriff Bukowski obtained at that time. In 2013, our original 911 equipment was replaced. That has allowed for us to prepare for next generation 911 or the ability to receive text messages and other data. In 2016, Bourbonnais consolidated with CANCOM as a result of some legislation that took place in Springfield. And currently we are working on bringing text to 911 into the centers, upgrading our paging system, and working to transition to the Starcom radio system. So our revenue comes from 2 sources. On the ETSB side, it comes from the surcharge. Back in 1989, the surcharge rate was established by local referendum. In 2001, the wireless rate was set by state legislation. And in June of 2015, legislation was passed that revoked the local referendums and created a uniform surcharge rate across the state for both wireline and wireless subscribers. And on January 1st of 2018, that rate was changed to $1.50 per line. That is due to sunset in December of next year. And it's also important to note that we don't receive that full $1.50. There is a formula that allows for each of the 911 systems to receive the same wireline revenue they were receiving back in 2013. The rest of those funds go into a pool, and once everything that's those dollars have been allocated for, have been pulled out, then the systems get the rest of those dollars. And some of the things that the monies are set aside for are counties under 100,000 get some additional revenue, the state administrative costs, network costs, and some grant funding. So once all that's done, then the rest of it comes to us. On the CanCom side, the revenue is generated from the agencies we dispatch for, including alarms that come directly into our center from Protection Associates. This is a general list of what the ETSB funds are or spends the surcharge dollars towards. We maintain a capital purchase inventory with a timeline of when that equipment, what the life expectancy on that is, and then each year we budget for replacement of the equipment that's necessary. And these are items that agencies with the dispatch centers once funded. That same legislation that was changed that provided us that $1.50 surcharge revenue also required some other things, including reducing the number of PSAPs throughout the state and making 911 available across the state. So currently 11 of the 13 counties either have or will soon have 911 service, and those were the unserved counties that didn't have 911 prior to this legislation. 64 ETSBs and 72 PSAPs have been consolidated. The state is currently reviewing proposals for the backbone for the next generation 911 network. As I said earlier, a portion of the surcharge dollars fund that. And then grants are also funded through those dollars collected. We received about $145,000 in grants when Bourbonnais consolidated with us, and we currently have an application in for a grant for about $116,000, and that'll be used towards GIS work, preparing for the new requirements that are going to be needed to route calls to the appropriate PSAPs. Some of our future needs, the state is ineligible for federal funding if the 911 funds are not used as they're intended to be used for. So this is the first time Illinois has been eligible for federal funding. We actually have 2 active grant applications in to help with that next generation project. So we continue to encourage the state legislators not to sweep the funds that are collected at the state. Build out of the next generation 911 network. You know, at this time, those costs are unknown, so we don't know if enough funds are being collected to do that. And Illinois is only one of 10 states that do not require telecommunicators to be certified. Locally, we're committed to training. Our staff goes through APCO's basic telecommunicator course and receives that certification, but there is a desire to have some standards set across the state. And as I said, our current surcharge funding expires next year, so without additional legislation, that revenue source will go away. The city and the county negotiated for nearly 10 years for dispatch consolidation before CanCom was formed. And when that happened, there was a creation of the Oversight Committee. And their purpose is really to have input on policy and procedures in the operation at CanCom by making recommendations to the ETSB. And by creating those policies that all agencies adhere to, the dispatcher's job really is more consistent. CanCom is funded by the agencies we serve. Over 80% of our budget is used towards salaries and benefits. The balance is used for training, our screening processes, and other operational costs. We do have an agreement with the county to provide our health insurance and be included in their IMRF program, but they do bill us monthly for that, and then you're reimbursed for those costs. This reflects our annual 911 call volume for both Bradley and CanCom for 2018. That orange portion represents the cellular call volume, so you can easily see that the largest number of our calls are coming from those cellular users. All cell calls route to CanCom. When we get those calls that are in Bradley's jurisdiction, if they're in progress, we take the information, we can put it into our shared CAD system. We do have the ability to dispatch those users if necessary, and then we can transfer the calls to that PSAP. This breaks down our daily call volume. CanCom handles about 135 911 calls each day. In addition to the 911 calls, we handle what we call administrative calls. And those can be both ingoing or outgoing. And they include things like a fire department calling in for run times. Could be general information, what time does the parade start? Some people think they can get an ambulance who will come without sirens if they don't call the emergency number. Alarm companies, it could be us making calls for tow companies or utility notifications, and a variety of other things.
Tammy, I got a quick question.
Sure.
You say 135 calls a day.
Mm-hmm.
How many did you handle the day of the storm in a short period of time?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I feel like there were like 400 calls that I looked at during that time frame.
I heard it was a little bit higher than that, but that just tells you what happens when there's a disaster.
Well,
I mean,
and maybe I should say those were the number of calls for service that were created,
Right.
not necessarily all the calls that came
Yeah.
in. The largest portion of the calls that we create actually come from officer-initiated traffic. Business or park checks, traffic stops, and paper services make up the largest portion of those calls. Countywide, there were over 195,000 calls for service that were generated at CanCom last year. That includes those 911 calls, the administrative lines, or that officer-initiated traffic. Aside from the officer-initiated calls, ambulance, accidents, domestic, and disorderly conduct make up our largest number of requests for service. At full staffing, we would have 28 telecommunicators. Unfortunately, we've been trying for 2 years to reach that full staffing level. Today, we have 26 full-time telecommunicators, with two currently going through our training program. I would just note that Bradley has 10 full-time dispatchers, but CanCom has no responsibility for the personnel at Bradley. Each dispatcher rotates positions daily so that they stay proficient in both fire and police dispatching. Today, the responsibilities for our on-duty staff, we have one person that's dedicated to the sheriff's department and the municipal police departments, one for city police, one for city fire, one for the rural fire districts, and one that does Bourbonnais Police and Fire. And our fire dispatchers act as our primary call takers. It takes approximately 2 years to become proficient with this job. Almost a quarter of our staff has less than 2 years experience, but on average, we have 12 years of experience. But I think even the most experienced person would tell you that they learn something new every day. Working together as a team is very important in this job, and overall our dispatchers do a fantastic job for as difficult as this job is. And then I just wanted to finish up with a few comments on the things that we're currently working on. We've been using our current radio system for almost 20 years. As technologies change, the manufacturers discontinue support on that legacy equipment. We were faced with our controller, which is the brains of our radio system, no longer being supported. We did get budgetary quotes for a standalone system, and those figures ranged from $6 to $7 million, and that was money we didn't have. Starcom is a system that was built out by Motorola for the state of Illinois. It's very much like a cell phone that you pay a flat dollar amount for usage of that system each month. I think the current rate is about $34 per month per radio. The maintenance costs for the system infrastructure of that system are built into those user fees. We were able to negotiate moving to Starcom at some reduced rates. We provided tower sites and frequencies into the Starcom pool to make that happen. So we will continue to be able to communicate not only with the agencies within Kankakee County, but any other agency throughout the state that is part of the Starcom system. Independently, agencies could have paid as much as $600,000 in total user fees, but we'll be paying much less for every agency in the county to have access to that system. Agencies are responsible for making the necessary radio upgrades for this transition. That was a plan we put in place in December of 2017, and we anticipate going live first quarter of 2020. We did upgrade our 911 equipment several years ago to be prepared for the ability to receive text messages. With the requirement of next generation in the legislation for 2020, we really needed to be prepared for that transition. With the growing number of security risks, text messages allow for communicating more discreetly. We understand the value of that and wanted to move forward and didn't want to wait for the state for that 2020 timeline. We did complete testing with our final carrier last week, so that is something that we'll be rolling out very soon. We still want people to call 911 if they can. Texting often lacks the emotion or some background information that can be beneficial when those calls are taken. But we also know that there's times when it's safer for an individual to text. And then finally, with our paging project, we will be transitioning from 5 to 7 transmitters throughout the county. Those will activate simultaneously to transmit those notifications to the fire departments. Our current system isn't capable of ensuring that those transmitters activate at the same time. So we've struggled with some voice quality, so the fire departments should see huge improvements when that goes into effect. And we anticipate that happening in the next few months. So that is a brief overview of what goes on in our department. If there's anybody that would like a tour of our center, we welcome you and invite you in. Just give our office a call and we'll schedule that for you.
Questions? Mr. Olthoff?
How are costs allocated to municipalities and users?
To the municipalities,
Yeah.
we had agreements.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had agreements way back when we started. The county, for example, contributed their existing communication budget at that time, and then there was a not to exceed 4% increase going forward from there.
Is it allocated by usage? No.
Not really.
Okay.
It was just a formula that the board and the agencies worked together at that time.
Thank you.
Mr. Snipes?
The 911 system, when we put it in place back in the 90s, I know it was a 25-cent ordeal, and I moved to push it to $1, and it went there. What do they charge now? Have they ever increased that, or?
Yes, it was changed by state legislation, and
Okay.
it's currently $1.50. As I mentioned, we don't receive that full portion of that $1.50, but
Okay, so it did kind of go up to sustain itself. Good.
yeah.
All right.
Any other questions? Mr. Lear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned communicating with other counties. I could see where a neighboring county would be important. Are any of our neighboring counties part of this STARCOM?
Livingston County, Grundy County, a portion of Will County is.
Thank you.
Mr. Legess?
If something happens to the system, is Bradley the backup?
Yes,
And who's the backup to Bradley?
we are.
What if you both go down? Isn't it an out-of-county that does it if both of them go down?
We did have one occurrence when that happened, and we transferred our calls down to Iroquois County. We sent a dispatcher down there to be able to answer the 911 calls, and it worked for us.
Does Riverside Ambulance pay us to dispatch for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? Thanks, Tammy.
Okay, thank you.
Up next, the Chief Judge. Circuit Clerk's Office, Miss Cianci. In your copy, you have in your package, you have a copy of the monthly report. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Byrne, second by Mr. Lear. Comments on your report, Sandy?
Hi. None that are any, if anybody has any questions on the end of period listing, that's the one you generally approve first, right? Yeah. So if there's nothing on that, then I can go ahead and explain what I changed up on my collections report. So.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I shortened up the report so that you could just see what we've done through June. I just showed May and June going forward on the local debt recovery Harrison Harris report. So we did $102,328 this last month, and our total for the year so far is $844,743. And then with the state's attorney court call, I'm not sure. I didn't talk to Desiree to ask her why she thought maybe, do you know, Jim, why it was so low this time?
That was really an anomaly.
That's what I,
Use your mic.
It's not first time we've seen the number drop like that.
yeah, and I wasn't sure, and we didn't talk, so I'm not sure. But the good news is we still brought in $80,000 for the year so far with that. So are there any questions with the collections report? Okay, so now going forward with the new Criminal Traffic Assessment Act, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to have their fees waived. And so I thought it would be a good idea to show what has been waived so far from January to June, so we could use that as a benchmark moving forward. So I wanted to outline that in the CFCM and JD, which are the criminal felony sealed, misdemeanor sealed, and the juvenile delinquent, those were all for expungement fee waivers. What I did is I ran each category in the system to see how many cases were filed and how many filings in those cases, and then what the dollar amount was that went for those. So the expungement fee waivers were $141 each, so that's how we got to those totals. In the adoption, chancery, divorce, family, law magistrate, miscellaneous remedy, probate, and small claims, those were either filing fees, appearance fees, motion to reinstate, or motion to vacate. And then there was an anomaly there with an order of protection. Someone thought that they could petition to have that expunged. Orders of protection never have a fee anyway, no matter what they do in the case. So they filed the fee waiver, not knowing that they didn't have to do it. We can't tell people what to file or what not to file, so we let them file the petition to expunge and let it go before the judge. And then the judge, of course, said that orders of protections are not eligible to be expunged. So, are there any questions about this chart? So then moving forward, what I'm going to do on a monthly basis is just see what the difference is with the new waiver fees that can happen. It could be, in any case, it could be a portion or all of the clerks, the county's portion, and the state's portion, with the exception of any of the traffic that goes under the Illinois Vehicle Code. So that would be felony DUI, misdemeanor DUI, major traffic, minor traffic, and the overweight tickets. Those would not be eligible for waivers of fees. And then it would also exclude some conditional assessments because they are reimbursements of some of the service provider costs. So does that
Questions?
give you guys any idea? Okay.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the reports. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Computerization.
Computerization. So July 1st was the big day for the Criminal Traffic and Assessment Act. I want to thank Paula Spalding for all her hard work. working with the vendors Odyssey, which is Tyler Technologies, and Courtview to make all the changes. There was a lot of work putting the spreadsheet together, applying the codes into Courtview, and then mapping and testing to be assured everything connected properly. While we tested, there probably is still room for some glitches somewhere, so we always expect that, and then if we don't get that, then we're happy. Also in the main office, led by Chief Deputy Debbie Colasar-Jezerski, they've done a wonderful job with the transition, helping the law offices and self-represented litigants. I'm still working on the fee sheet for the law offices and others to use as a guide and reference, so they know that they are making the right choices when they're doing the e-filing. The legislators were making changes right up to the last minute on Friday before the July 1st start, so that was kind of why I was waiting for that too. The traffic supervisor, Lori Johnson, reports that there have been few violators that have paid their new tickets after July 1st, right after court, so their experience with the changes will probably be later in the month or in the next month or so. And it seems like the courtrooms are adjusting smoothly with the transition. I haven't heard any backlash yet, so I'm guessing. But we were light with court activity last week anyway, so it was probably a good week to start this whole process. The integration was put on hold because it was all hands on deck between Odyssey and Tyler Courtview and our office for this criminal traffic assessment project. We'll be getting back on track with that soon. And then for the Courtview maintenance agreement, Andy did a good job explaining that yesterday at the county board meeting, so if there's any other questions about that. Okay, well that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we have a state's attorney, Mr. Rowe. In your packet, we have a grand jury report and a grand jury statistics report for June of 2019. Take a motion to combine and approve. Mr. Eckhoff, second by Mr. Fairfield. Comments on your report, sir?
We're up to 496 felonies have gone through the grand jury this year. You can see, apart from controlled substance cases, still the highest number are the felony domestics. And I talk about that every meeting, but I remind you those are strangulation and repeat offenders, so those are very serious cases. We continue to work with Harbor House, other organizations. We go around, we talk about teen dating violence. We are looking for ideas on how we can reduce those numbers of domestic batteries, felony domestic batteries, misdemeanors. So if people have ideas, if there's groups that I can send our domestic abuse prosecutors to talk with, anything like that, we're always open to ideas. Any questions about that?
Mr. Legess.
Jim, do you have any statistics on where the majority of those are coming from? Is it lower incomes? Is it middle income, higher income?
Actually, I don't. I mean, we don't see a trend like that. Domestic battery
Just across the board?
Every community, every home, across all the demographics.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Olthoff.
Are the penalties stiff enough?
For domestic violence? Well, Robert. Was that a question? You have, so a first offender domestic battery, that's a misdemeanor, so it's punishable by less than 1 year in jail. On your second offense, it's an automatic class 4. As you accumulate multiple offenses, it can go up. A strangulation is a class 2, so you're looking at more serious possibility of prison time. They get lengthy sentences when it's a felony domestic battery. Most first-time offenders are put into, I think there's been a program in place for many years in the county, a domestic violence diversion program, where they start to learn to correct those behaviors. They address drug or alcohol issues that they may be dealing with. And that's a lengthy program. It's not you take a class or two. First you have to address the drug or alcohol addiction issue by counseling, inpatient, outpatient, and then you go in through, what is it, Tom, do you know, like 27, 28, 26-week program. So it's a lengthy program, and if they successfully complete that, they are not convicted of that domestic battery. So the recidivism rate, they've done some studies. I met with Judge Elliott, I think it was late last year or early this year, about what is the recidivism rate for those offenders, and it is significantly less than someone that has not participated in that program. So I wasn't really too fond of sending people that are accused of domestic violence into some diversion program, but it looks like to be more successful in preventing a repeat offense than the other approaches.
Any other questions? Mr. Snipes?
Just one.
One.
I'm trying to phrase it so it be in one. This, the concern of human trafficking, have you all had the opportunity to experience that in Kankakee County? Has any approach been taken to kind of skirt that type of
Sure. So you know
behavior
there's
or criminality in Kankakee?
So Kankakee and Iroquois have a joint task force, the Kankakee-Iroquois Human Trafficking Task Force. They meet on a regular basis. They have combined, they brought basically all the service providers in the community and volunteers together to address that issue. We've not had any human trafficking cases come through the office for prosecution. That doesn't mean it's not happening in our community, though. You know, those are difficult cases. When you have, prostitution, that a lot of times those are cases of human trafficking. You sometimes have forced labor. It's tough for people to report those crimes. I know that the Sheriff's Department does a great job. They've worked closely with that task force, and I believe, Sheriff, when people are entered into the jail, if there's any suspicion of that, they're interviewed. That's one of the questions I think that is asked in connection with certain offenses. So county's been very vigilant on human trafficking and trying to help people if they're involved in that situation. But thus far, we've not had any cases come through for prosecution.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Jump for Kankakee County kids.
Yep. So JUMP is a juvenile mentoring program. We just got word a couple of weeks ago that we were awarded a grant from AmeriCorps. It's approximately $186,000. This allows us to fund a mentoring program that ideally will take every juvenile when they enter the juvenile justice system, so when they're charged with an offense, and we'll pair them with a mentor. That mentoring program is approximately 21 months. That's 2 academic years, 9-month academic years, and then the 3-month summer in between. So we match the juvenile with the mentor. They meet regularly either in the school during school hours or at the YMCA during after hours. Both the mentor and the mentee in this program receive a free YMCA membership. So that's sort of a neutral space where they can meet, participate in Y-focused activities. We're using the YMCA's national model for this. It's a successful model. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel on mentoring. We want something that works, and Will Welsh at the YMCA, Penny Greenlee have been great in bringing that model to the forefront. They're willing to train our mentors under the Y training model, and of course, full and complete background checks for everyone. When the student is paired with the mentor, we're looking to reduce truancy among the juveniles. The statistics bear out that if a child is truant, they're 8 times more likely to be either an offender of a violent crime or a victim of a violent crime. So if we can just keep them in school, those numbers go down significantly. And if they're in school, hopefully their academic performance improves as well. And we want to start engaging with the kids on their career goals, some of their long-term goals, and also short-term. What type of dangerous activities are they involved in their life, in our community, that we can get them out of. During the summer months, the focus is on building those life skills. So we're looking for area employers to set some jobs aside for the juveniles in JUMP so that in the summer they can work there, they earn a paycheck like anyone else would. Ideally, maybe they can get a job even where their mentor works, so you can keep that relationship going during the summer and continue to mentor them while you're in a working environment. We want to get them to community events where they're at tables and they're engaging with professional individuals so they can learn those conversational skills, how to work in a social setting, just to improve some of their opportunities and abilities in the community. That program, the funding for that program funds approximately 21 positions that individuals who will receive a stipend for their work. So that's 18 mentors which are receiving a stipend. So those 18 individuals are going to be called upon to mentor a number of students each. And then in addition to the stipend they receive, they're also, because the State's Attorney's Office is now a regional site for AmeriCorps, they're also able to obtain up to a $6,000 voucher for college per year. So it's helping them, pay for their tuition as well. 2 of those 21 positions are court liaisons. These are individuals who are going to be responsible for going to court, keeping the juvenile judge up to speed on how the juvenile is participating in that program, working with juvenile probation. We have put a lot on Grace, and I apologize to Grace, Tom. We've put a lot on her the last couple of months as we've been trying to get this program up and running. So it'll be great to have those 2 positions come in, and they can take the place of the work we've been doing in my office, juvenile probation, the court system, to kind of make sure everyone's on the same page for every single kid in the system. And then one of the positions is a coordinator position. So those 21 positions are all receive stipends under the grant. They're all also eligible for the $6,000 tuition voucher. Outside of those 21 positions, volunteer mentors that come forward can receive the $6,000 tuition stipend. So we're really hoping that we can pair every kid that comes into the system with a mentor and get them back on the right path so they don't end up upstairs in the 300 courtrooms, the felony courtrooms. So I think, we can prosecute crime all day, and prevention is always important, but this is sort of at the intervention stage. They've already started to go down the wrong path. We're trying to keep them and catch them early enough so we keep them from continuing down that path.
Questions? Anything else? Oh, no, wait a minute. You said one question earlier.
No, that was for that one.
Oh.
Now, this is not so much a question as it is a commendation, because I work in the school systems or whatever, and then had to deal with the high school. It's kind of irregular for a state's attorney to kind of get involved a lot with youth, and Jim took the opportunity to do that, and not only do it, but he took on a challenging student, very challenging, where he had to go from state's attorney to being that kid's dad,
To Advil.
to being his friend, right? So the whole 9 yards. And so he was tough with the kid in the whole 9 yards. Didn't think he was going to kind of make it at some point because like he was giving up. But old Jim would show up at this, well, not old Jim, but Jim would show at the school, and then he had his heart-to-heart talk and the whole 9 yards. And to take that approach and to be involved in the school systems, and to take that approach to be involved in someone's life, the individual was able to graduate and cross the stage. And at that time, and they had Jim on the stage or whatever, because that was his student. He was there to give him a hug. It brought a half a tear to my eye. But it's commendable when you start seeing you stepping outside of the box to really care about these kids or whatever. And that's like a passion outside of what you do that you've included within that state's attorney's office. And I say it's from the school district 111, who kind of applauds you, as well as the parents and some of the people in the community. We hear your name a lot. You have that passion. So I just say keep up the good work. I'm sure you're going to do well on the small ed case as well.
I'm not going to talk about that. I had a mentor that made all the difference for me in my life, so I'm happy to pay it forward, pay it back, whatever you call it.
Mr. Lear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. Jim, I think this is an excellent program. I applaud you for getting into this. Just trying to understand the administration of it a little better. In terms of the grants, I assume that this will all go through the county payroll system?
Yes, it does.
Okay. I just need to be clear on that. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Rowe? Yes, Mr. Yes.
I think it's a great program. It's a life-saving program. I'd like to accommodate, I'd like to commend all those that are, involved in the program. And also, I wish we'd had this program when Bob Snipes was a youngster.
No comment. Okay, in your packet, you have a copy of the Public Defender's Monthly Report. I'll take a motion to put it on file. Mr. Smith, second by Mr. Byrne. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Probation, Mr. Latham. In your copy, you also have a copy, or in your package, you have a copy of the Probation Monthly Report. Take a motion to approve. Ms. Parker, second by Mr. Eckhoff. Comments on your report, Tom?
Nothing out of the ordinary with our monthly stats. There was a few issues on that report. There's a few things missing. We just had a problem. It's been fixed, but it was a little too late to get it back out. The only stat I'd like to point out, if you look at June of 18 report, this same time last year, we collected about 1,000 drug tests, and you can see on there we're just a little over 1,500. So almost 600 more tests this year at the same time. A lot of that's because of a grant that has put a person that just does drug testing in our office 3 days a week. So we've been able to kick up the amount of drug testing we're doing. And the only other stat is this same time last year, we had a total of 2,031 detention days, and this year a little over 1,500, so about 475 less days. So I thought they were kind of jumped out at me. Just wanted to report it. That's it.
Questions on the reports? Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
The only other thing I have this month is related to pretrial supervision, which we've talked about here before. As a result of the Bail Reform Act, that requires basically non-monetary bail for a long list of offenses. People are just basically released rather quickly. AOIC is soon going to require that we provide supervision for these people. Actually, supervision standards are being finalized now. Randy Turner, who oversees our adult division in the Kankakee office, sits on one of those committees. The issue we have is the numbers that we have show we would need 4 additional people, 3 to 4 additional people. I was gone last week. This all started last Wednesday, and I was out of town on vacation, but we had a conference call with the state, and I laid it out that any chance of this moving forward, these positions would have to be 100% funded. The conversation was rather positive. I even heard the term funded mandate at one point in the conversation, which I never heard that term before. I had to Google it actually and see what it meant. So this is very early. I haven't, and I've been gone. I haven't even had a chance to sit down with the chairman and talk about it with him. The chief judge is out of town, but they're pushing this. They talk as if they're going to fund it, but we're still very early and a long way from anything happening. But I just wanted to bring it up to you this month and let you guys know let everyone know where it's at. So
Question?
very general, I know. Any questions on that? That's all I have.
Thank you. Sheriff, you're up. In the package, you have a copy of the monthly report, and you should have received it by email. Take a motion to approve. Mr. Legess, second by Ms. Dunbar.
Good morning.
Morning. Comments?
A couple. You'll notice on the report has been in this format for a number of years, but the first section is obviously the corrections. And I can tell you that our local numbers remain high. Hopefully what Tom just talked about will help alleviate some of that, where we can get some individuals who could be out of jail and be supervised. There's a big difference when they just get out of jail and they're running around with no supervision. That makes a huge difference. So hopefully that moves forward. Tom might be one of the few departments that gets a funded mandate. I wouldn't know what that is. We are averaging approximately $5,000 more per day, mainly because of the rate increase that we have through the federal government. We only have federal inmates and detainees now. We have nobody from Cook County. And our out-of-county numbers have remained consistent, so, and I don't see that changing. In fact, we are turning people away because of our jail population right now, so. I know that this is always a question as far as the number of criminal versus non-criminal detainees that we have with ICE. And that number for June, I believe the number for May was, I don't even remember, but it was 80. It was 80% in, I'm sorry, and for May. And in June, it was 60%. So that's a number that is ever evolving and moving. Halfway through the month, our number was upwards of 80. And as we get people back from Chicago, that number moves a little bit. So far in July right now, it's at 72. So I would anticipate that number is going to be anywhere from 60 to 80 to even 90% in some cases. I know that there's some question as to what validates a criminal charge. When we look at these charges that they have, the majority, all of them are legitimate felonies. There are some DUIs, but again, even though DUI is a misdemeanor, I would caution everybody to look at that as a misdemeanor, because I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't want to get hit by somebody who's drunk. So you can call it a misdemeanor and think it's not a serious crime until a drunk hits you. Then it becomes serious. So, and then there's also some question about how ICE determines their criminal record, and that's there's always an excuse for, why we're housing immigrants, and the criminal record's not right, or we have what we have. The information we have is what I provide you guys. So it is what it is. Questions on the corrections side of it?
Mr. Snipes.
Just to clear up, is there a distinguishable difference between jailing someone and detaining someone?
I would say if you're jailing someone, they're in jail. If you're detaining someone, police can detain somebody in a room until they make a determination whether they arrest someone. I would.
Right. Okay. And so when you make an arrest, or when an officer makes an arrest of anybody, say like a mother, if you walked up in there and she had 10 kids or whatever, and you make that arrest, you will be separating that mother from that child if they were just a regular United States citizen? And
Yes.
you'll probably be finding someone
There
to
would
take
be,
care of the
yes,
child.
they would
but-
find a social service agency to take care of the children.
Right, but you would be separating at that particular time, wouldn't?
Yes.
Okay, and then just one last question. Is it a federal crime to be undocumented in the United States, no matter who you are?
If you're undocumented, you're undocumented. How they classify that is
It's basically
not
up
up to
on
us.
that, so no
Yeah.
matter what, so if I go to any country and I'm undocumented and they do something to me, it would be part of their protocol to protect the safety of the people of their country and to
Correct.
make sure that you are actually documented.
That's correct. Yes.
Whether I go anywhere. So that's just all I wanted to say, because I think sometimes we have to clear up some things that makes it look as if we're just doing something way out the box. It's nothing more than what we would do in our normal duty or whatever, if you was to basically deal with a U.S. citizen.
Correct. You didn't mention in here either that we sent 9 to prison and released 89. That's a statistic that I look at every month.
That is that is probably normal.
That's
It's typical, and again, if you look at the number through the first 6 months of the year, we're at 628. Last year there was 835 released from the Department of Corrections. This year we're looking at projecting about 1,200.
1,200.
So
That's unreal. Mr. Altoff first.
Thank you, Chairman. Of the 20 to 40% that aren't criminal. Are those from employer raids? Those aren't traffic offenses or anything like that?
No, so the way the information is provided to us is they either come with, there is a section on the form that ICE gives us that says criminal record, and it'll list a criminal offense. They also list what they abbreviate as NC, which would be no charge, and then there is also illegal entry. But remember, illegal entry, and I've said this before, if you cross the border, get deported, and then come back again, that's an automatic deportation. That's not our rules. Those are, Washington D.C.'s rules. So while they're not criminal, that means that they've come twice or more, and they get sent back. So that's, again, that's
what
automatic.
That's what the 20 to 40%
Yes.
is?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Legess.
Mike, didn't the governor sign a bill that bars privatization of facilities in the state?
They did.
So that, in other words, the one in Dwight is off.
I think it's
And
pretty
anybody
much a
else
non-issue,
is,
yeah.
I mean, in an odd sort of way, that helps us. It
Yes.
kind of eliminates the competition, so to
Well,
speak.
I've said before, what Dwight was proposing, or what the company was, ICA, I believe, is the company. What they were proposing is to house non-criminals.
Right,
So if they're not housing non-criminals, somebody still has to house the criminals. So
right.
while yes, would we lose some of those maybe? Yeah, possibly, but we would still have the
Yeah.
ones charged with the crime.
Any other questions on the correction side?
I actually do have this is still on the correction side, the transports. One of the things, and while it's good to hear Tom report that our juvenile housing numbers have gone down a little bit, we are responsible for the transportation of those juveniles back and forth to River Valley. And I can tell you that through our calendar year so far, if my math is right, which sometimes is a little suspect, there have been 124 business days through June of 2019 in the calendar year. We have made 164 trips to River Valley. So that's about 1.3 trips per day. Sometimes we go 3 times a day, sometimes we go twice a day, sometimes we go once a day, sometimes we don't go, but ultimately the average is about 1.3 trips per day through the course of January 1st through June 30th. So, and again, those are, some of these transports that you see through the marshals, ICE, the majority of medical, those are trips that we get reimbursed for. We do not get reimbursed for trips to River Valley. So that obviously contributes to some of our overtime as well.
I believe Chairman Wheeler has a question. I didn't even know he was back there.
I can't see him. Believe it or not, that podium is blocking him.
Yeah, it's a big podium. My question is statutorily, are counties responsible for transporting the juveniles from the municipalities, or do we just do that?
Statutorily, no. If, let's take, for example, the Village of Bradley. If the Village of Bradley makes a juvenile arrest and juvenile probation, and there are criteria that juvenile probation has before they detain someone. If juvenile probation says, yes, he meets the criteria to be detained, I guess statutorily the Village of Bradley should be responsible for transporting him to River Valley. Our mentality, though, throughout all of this for the last, ever since I can remember, about 30 years, is that it is beneficial for us, being corrections, to transport him or her to leave those police officers on the street in the county. I think that's just, a benefit that our citizens of this county deserve, and so we've always done it. That's one trip. So, we're once they go to their initial court session, or their initial court appearance rather, then it's our responsibility anyway. So that would be one trip that those municipalities would be responsible for. And my personal feeling is we are better off in this county to have the police on the street than transporting some juvenile to Will County.
And so right now, is corrections driving them up, or is that patrol that's driving them up?
Mainly corrections, but it depends on workload and availability.
I don't know how this committee feels, but maybe we should take a look at that and really have a thought about what that means in a cost sense. Are you able to break that out?
We could break that down through initial cost and see what agencies are, that we're transporting for.
Okay, because I'd rather have another person on the road in the county, if we're doing something just because we're nice. I'd rather have a patrolman out in certain areas of the counties that need patrol. That's my
Well, and
opinion.
I mean, let me clarify. I mean, the majority, and I'd say 95% are done by corrections. So it's only a small, very small number that would involve patrol. And a lot of times it would be one patrolman, one correctional officer, if it ever gets to that.
Thank you.
Sworn side.
Sworn side. Under the fatals, you see, in June, we've had 10 fatals, and these are county-wide fatals. These aren't all on county roads. But there are 10 through 2000, so far for 2019. We had 9 in all of 2018. So that's a trend that we'd like to reduce. We have identified some areas that are problematic, and obviously we focus on those areas as well, but that is somewhat concerning that number goes up. That's a number that we don't want going up. 1 is too many. But when we're halfway through the year and we've already surpassed last year, that becomes problematic. So we are dealing with that as well. Questions on that? And lastly, on the report, our revenue for housing. If you look at housing alone under Section 3, the under number 1, the bed rentals, we are projecting approximately $12 million in housing revenue alone for fiscal year 2019. Our budget for the corrections and patrol division are on pace with our budget numbers, which is a good thing. And one of the glaring things that sticks out for me in our budget right now is that we have spent more through June right now, $35,000 more in auto repair at this time this year than we have last year at this time. So that is certainly concerning, and the next thing we'll talk about is vehicles. So that's all I have on that whole report.
Any questions on the report? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
And lastly, and the chairman and I have discussed this, and we're trying to be cognizant of all of the county's money. And we are, through Steve McCarty and Amy Ludke in our office, working through where we're at with our leases. And ideally, we would like to have one lease end before we start another lease so that we're not spending additional money. And that's our goal, so that's where we're trying to get to right now. But hopefully, I don't believe we'll bring it to finance at the end of this month. I think we'll bring it back here as far as a request for cars and a timeline of where we're at so that we're not taking out another lease. We're just basically offsetting a lease that comes to an end as opposed to creating another lease that costs the county more money. So we'll have that information for you probably next month at this meeting as opposed to the finance meeting.
But $35,000, that's a vehicle.
That's a vehicle. Yes, that's a vehicle. And that includes, when I say that, when I talk about the leases, we're talking about both patrol and corrections, because our corrections fleet does put miles on their vehicles. One of the things that really has helped us in the past couple of years has been taking a couple of those old squad cars and using those for in-town transports, whether it's to the hospital, whether it's to the courthouse. Obviously, Tahoes don't transport 12 inmates, but on those situations where we go to the hospital with one, that's a perfect vehicle to do that. So we're utilizing those, which limits the miles a little bit. So.
Mr. Olthoff.
I feel like I'm competing with Mr. Snipes, but
You got a long way to go.
those leases, are those 3-year leases?
3 or 4.
And the warranty is
Warranty
by miles?
is 5 years, 100,000 miles.
And we run over that
Bumper to bumper.
We run over that 100,000 miles.
Yes.
That's what causes us.
Yes. Yeah, the last group of cars, I mean, originally we had 11, 12s, and 13s. And then I think our most recent purchase was a 16. So you had 11s that obviously ran through those 5 years. And with the miles we put on cars because of the size of the county was more than 100,000.
The miles are the issue.
Yeah.
That we're during the lean years, we sort of slacked off because we were on a program. I mean, this is going back quite a few years. That we were supposed to buy 12 cars every year. That way, we kept the rotation going, and it kept the maintenance costs down. But during the lean years, we sort of got out of that program.
And you also received more for the trade-in
Right.
for those cars, too.
You said one last question twice now. All right, I'll give you one more chance.
One more. I've been asked this question. I did not know the answer, so I'm going to. This is probably a blindsided, so you might have to do some research. I don't know. I like the way his eyes.
I'm just starting to think.
The question was asked whether or not individuals who are arrested but not had not been convicted yet, they might be being detained. Do they get an opportunity to vote during an election?
In jail?
In jail.
Yes. They have to request it, though. But I think the law has changed. I think now we have to provide that for them.
Okay, so they do get the opportunity to vote?
Yes.
All right, now they can see this tape.
They have, well, in the past, they've had to request it.
Okay.
But now I believe the law has changed, and of course, our next election is whenever, 2020, so hopefully we'll be prepared by then.
Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed a new column on here that says annex security. I just noticed that.
Yes.
Looks like 52 per day now that we have a magnetometer and somebody at the door of the annex. And that's just for public defender and probation, correct?
I think public defender, probation, and whatever classes or things that they have going on down there.
Okay.
That's an average.
52 per day. Okay.
Any other questions or comments for the sheriff? Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
No, I cannot. I'm seriously, I didn't know he was here.
I can't see him either.
Coroner, Mr. Gessner, in your package you have a copy of the monthly report and the monthly receipts of money. I'll take a motion to combine and approve. Mr. Legess, Ms. Sakulo, a second. Comments on your reports, sir?
Basically, it looks pretty good. Autopsies have been down for the month of June. Other than that, calls are still up. I do notice that when the clerk reads
Pull your mic down.
our statistics wise there, when he talks about the total number of calls, like in June 105, coroner's 15, that's where the coroner gets involved with the case, and it takes probably sometimes anywhere from 2-3 weeks up to a month before all the information that we can get as far as medical records and stuff like that. So that's a coroner's case. That's what a coroner does, signs a death certificate and gives the mode of death. Other than that, I think it's well. Also, too, when the sheriff says that there's 10, I think you said, fatalities, You'll see in ours it's 6 there because there are times where the helicopter or the ambulance takes them to Chicago and they die there, and that's part of the fatal here. So you'll see that number different. Other than that, I'll take any questions on that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Budget-wise, we're looking pretty good on the budget-wise with into July already, so we're doing pretty on the average of that, hanging on what we did last year. So autopsies are down a little bit there. Other than that, that's where we're at. And I just want to take I'd like to express my gratitude towards a couple of people. Chief Jim Spoon from the member and his members of the Momence Fire Department District. Also Louis John Farber, the conservation officer, and his staff. They're involved in our recent drowning that was in the Illinois-Indiana state line from June 8th all the way to June 20th before we recovered the body. The members of the Momence Fire Department District had numerous occasions to respond to this location to search and help in the recovery, along with the conservation officer. They were in really dangerous situations there. We had a log jam that was in 12 feet of water. The current was running probably triple the amount. It was 3 knots up to 12 knots, the reason why divers couldn't go in there. We had sonars looking, both the Momence Fire Department and the conservation, to be able to find the body in 12 feet of water underneath all that stuff. They had to tear that apart. And the amount of work that they did out there to find that body was unbelievable. I was out there probably, out of the 8 days that we were out there, 12 days that they were out there, I was probably out there at least 10 times watching them. The amount of people that they had were a minimum amount because of the log jam and the current that was running through there. It shows you that what dedication, especially Momence Fire Department, does. Their dedication and responsibility to help in that recovery process was unbelievable. And along with, I call him Louis, Farber was excellent to work with there. But I think we should know that what goes on in this county for not only fire departments and conservation and sheriffs and all the police department, what positive we work together, and it really means a lot to get that body. We were at one point, didn't know how we were ever going to get it out of there in a log jam that was unbelievable. You could walk across it, and sonars were able to go down there. We could see the body, but we couldn't get to the body. So it was unbelievable for what they did, and my gratitude goes out to them. Just wanted to let you know that. So.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for the coroner? Thank you, sir. Is there any old business to come before the committee? Any old business? Any new business to come before the committee? Any new business? Take a motion to adjourn by Mr. Legess, second by Ms. Dunbar. All in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.